So let's talk about hibiscus tea today, ladies. I am actually drinking some of it right now, made a big batch yesterday, and I have been craving this tea a lot recently, to the point where it's like every time I drink it, it feels just so profoundly satisfying, like deep down in my bones. And the other thing I've noticed as I drink it in recent months is that I am no longer putting honey in it. So that is very bizarre and strange for me, because in the previous years when I would make hibiscus, I always insisted on putting honey to kind of bring down that tart flavor. But again, it's like this last few months, my body's just saying, nope, I just want the straight pure thing, nothing added to it. So I wanted to make this video to share with you some of my theories on what these cravings might be representing, and also to share with you the incredible benefits of hibiscus, because it is one of those herbs that can be very easy to overlook, but it's actually very accessible. It's also very affordable as far as cost, so it's definitely one to study up on and see if it makes sense for you. So I'm going to talk about all things hibiscus in this video, but before I get into the details, hello and welcome. If you are brand new to me, my name is Jermaine Satya. I am a health coach, and this channel is all about helping women to live well and be well. So let's dive into that cravings element first. Now, my philosophy when it comes to cravings is that they're not accidental, and this is not necessarily an original thought of mine. This is something that I have learned just through my own self-study of herbalism and other holistic modalities, let's say. There is this idea in the holistic world that the body will point you in the direction of what it needs at any given time, right? Whether it has to do with a specific food or nutrient, or that is something that I definitely believe in. So with that framework in mind, I started asking myself, like, why hibiscus? Why now, right? Like, I've been drinking this tea for many years. There's no reason why all of a sudden it's become something that I am so much more attracted to, except there are a couple of things. For one, I started buying hibiscus from a different company, and that was intentional because I had bought some other herbs from them, and I had noticed that the other ones were just better quality. So I thought, why not try their hibiscus? And lo and behold, my body just responded so much more positively to this one. So I think it's better quality, better grown, probably harvested at the right time also for peak potency. All of those things matter when it comes to herbs. The other thing is also just looking at my age. So at 47, I am going through perimenopause. I don't necessarily have any symptoms currently that I would attribute to that, but just based on common knowledge, one would say that at my age, there's most likely some changes going on in my body. Hallelujah, there's nothing really crazy happening that I am noticing. But one thing I know about hibiscus is that it is an herb that is always, and very frequently, I should say, very frequently used to support female cycle and support hormones and different aspects of our health, whether we're in perimenopause or also in our younger years. It is just one of those herbs that is used throughout life to support female health. So it is no coincidence to me that at this time also my body might be craving it a little bit more instead of all the other teas that I have, because I've got plenty other teas that my body could have been like, give me more, but it's not doing that with anything except this one. So that's the basic premise. The other thing also is that when we look at hibiscus, so if we look at, let's say, Ayurvedic medicine, so Ayurveda is basically the traditional Indian medical system, I would say. And in Ayurveda, hibiscus is an herb that pacifies pitta. Now, pitta is one of the doshas in the Ayurvedic system. Now, if you're not familiar with doshas, those are basically energy patterns that live in our system that govern our bodies. They govern us in terms of our physical, like how the body functions at the physical level, emotionally, and mentally, right? So pitta is one of them, and pitta represents the fire element. In Ayurveda, a lot of the symptoms related to perimenopause and menopause are associated with an imbalance in pitta, so an imbalance in that fire element. Too much fire will create symptoms like hot flashes, not surprisingly. Too much fire, too much heat will also create inflammation. Also not shocking when you think about it. And that inflammation, can show up in different ways. Could be maybe pain in joints or muscles. The imbalance of pitta or fire element can also show up in the form of irritability. Irritability in this case is really just pointing to the fact that there is excessive heat as far as our emotional state of being. So we're not able to really stay regulated, and so we can get impatient and get very short with others and maybe not even make the right decisions for every given moment. So that is another way that an imbalance in pitta or heat can show up in our system. So it will show up physically, it will show up emotionally, it will show up in all kinds of different ways. And hibiscus is seen as a cooling herb. So the technical term for it is it's a refrigerant. So refrigerant related to a refrigerator, and refrigerators keep things cool. So it can help us in an endless number of ways once we learn how to work with it. So that in a nutshell is hibiscus. Now I want to talk more specifically about the actual benefits that have been studied and shown when it comes to hibiscus. So the first thing is hibiscus is anti-inflammatory, and a lot of this is due to the antioxidants. So things like anthocyanins, for example, which is also what gives it its very dominant red color. So by being rich in antioxidants, hibiscus basically just helps to protect the body from daily wear and tear, right? From daily stress. And that stress could be chemical, physical, or emotional. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. All of those different stressors will trigger the body's inflammatory response. And that's okay when it's acute stress, but if we're getting into that chronic stress is where things can really get messy for us. So something like hibiscus will help us in just protecting the body from the damaging effects of those stressors. The second benefit of hibiscus is that it may help to alleviate hot flashes. So as I mentioned, it's a cooling herb, it's a refrigerant, and different cultures have used it in different ways. So I found some information about how in countries like Egypt and Sudan, it is used to lower body temperature. I also found some information from Herbal Academy's website where they talked about hibiscus being really helpful in hydrating for those very hot and stuffy summer months, and also mentioning that it's helpful for personal summers, aka hot flashes. So there are lots of different uses for this tea when it comes to that. In addition, the other thing to know is that hibiscus has phytoestrogens. So again, having those plant estrogens can be helpful when the body is going through significant changes, like it is in midlife when we're having some very major drops really in estrogen levels. The third benefit of hibiscus has to do with the fact that it may help to stabilize our mood and provide some degree of emotional support. So something very interesting with hibiscus is that it is rich in flavonoids, and flavonoids are compounds that have been shown to help when it comes to reducing oxidative stress, which ultimately helps with improving our mood. Now, the thing to know here is that there's been some studies that show a correlation between high levels of oxidative stress and depressive symptoms. And on the flip side, there's been research pointing to the fact that people who consume higher amounts of flavonoid-rich foods tend to experience less depressive symptoms. Hibiscus happens to be a flavonoid-rich food, so there is some potential here that it could provide some emotional support. Another interesting thing from one of those studies was that they found that the effects were actually more profound or more pronounced in women. So the positive effects of these flavonoid-rich foods was actually more pronounced in women than in men, which is just very interesting. I'm not quite sure why there was that gender difference, but there is one. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, obviously, this is not saying that you should drop any antidepressants or any other meds or even like therapy that you're doing. This is just saying that there is a correlation but studies are still ongoing, and there really aren't any studies that have looked at hibiscus specifically. These studies have just looked at flavonoids in general. So we would still need studies that really focus in on hibiscus to see if that is truly the case for this plant itself. Now, the last benefit I want to mention has to do with liver health. So there are some animal studies suggesting that hibiscus could be helpful for protecting and supporting the liver. So one study, for example, showed that hibiscus is effective at reducing the accumulation of fat in the liver. Another one pointed to the fact that hibiscus was helpful for reducing markers of liver damage. And another study found that hibiscus could also be helpful when it comes to improving or restoring the activity of liver enzymes. So solely based on these animal studies, there are some potentially amazing benefits for our liver. We have to wait, of course, for those human studies to fully confirm all of this. So those are the 4 main benefits of hibiscus that I wanted to touch on. Now, there are 2 other benefits that I did not get to in this video. So one has to do with the effects of hibiscus on weight and obesity. The other has to do with its effects on high blood pressure. And actually the one related to high blood pressure is quite interesting because there are some pretty amazing results in terms of what it can do for blood pressure and heart health. I even came across information from a scientific paper that talked about the fact that there are at least 10 countries in the world that use hibiscus as a treatment for hypertension. So I've written more about both of those in an article that's on my blog, so I will link to that if you want to dive deeper into those details. And now what I want to do is transition into talking about how I make hibiscus tea. So when I'm making hibiscus tea, I typically just go with the standard recipe for herbal teas, which is 1 teaspoon of dried herb to 1 cup of boiled water. Now, sometimes I might do a little more herb if I want it to be stronger. I might do a little less if for some reason I just want the flavor to be weaker. But generally speaking, I just go with that 1-to-1 ratio. For the particular batch that I have with me right now, I made this yesterday. And for this one, I did 2 tablespoons of hibiscus. So that's 6 teaspoons. 2 tablespoons of hibiscus and 5 cups of boiled water. So I wanted this to be a little bit stronger. In addition, my personal preference with tea is I would let them sit for a really long time. So typically my hibiscus tea might sit for a minimum of 30 minutes. It might go on for a good hour or 2 because it's a tea that overall is pleasant in terms of flavor. So I don't worry so much about having it sit for a long time, in the sense that it's not, unlike some other teas that can be bitter, the longer they sit, you don't have that issue with hibiscus. So I'll typically just let it steep longer, and my thinking is that, again, just extract more of those beneficial compounds as much as I can. And then I would drink, like making a 5-cup batch, I will typically drink that within 2 days, right? So I might be drinking 2 to 3 cups of it per day when I make a large batch. I try not to go beyond 2 days because teas will also lose their potency as they sit in the fridge, even though the fridge is helpful for keeping it fresh, but there are no preservatives in it. So I try not to go beyond 2 days with my tea. So that is how I go about making my hibiscus. Now, going back to the brand that I mentioned. So the brand that I use is Worldwide Botanicals. This is a brand that I started using about a year ago. And I've been using some other brands in the past, but for some reason, when I switched to the hibiscus is also when I feel like my body really started enjoying it more and actually getting some benefits from it. So that is the one that I would recommend, and I will place a link to their hibiscus in the show notes. So if you want to take a look, you can go ahead and do that. One other thing that I did mention earlier in the video is also that when it comes to supporting the the menstrual cycle, like hibiscus is also used tremendously for that. And it's interesting because I watched a few other videos here on YouTube and noticed some comments from women who were saying that when they started drinking hibiscus, their cramps went away and their period just became so much easier to be with. So just something to consider, because I did not really touch on that aspect a lot. But you will see that when you go and look at a lot of products on the market that are for supporting the menstrual cycle or even for supporting the body during midlife, you will often see hibiscus in the blend. So, and it does work quite well with some other herbs. I know that some people will throw in some cinnamon, and there's nothing wrong with throwing some cinnamon in there because cinnamon's also good when it comes to like regulating blood sugar. So that's a good thing always to have. Some people I think will also combine it with mint sometimes. You could, I did see a recipe, I've not tried this, but you could also combine it from what I saw online. You could also combine it with sage. Sage is another underrated and often overlooked herb, especially in midlife, especially when it comes to things like hot flashes. I actually have a video that talks about sage, so I'll also link to that, but you could also combine those two and see how it works for you. And then last but not least, you want to be mindful when it comes to combining hibiscus with medication. That goes for every herb, but while we're on this topic, because as I mentioned earlier, it is known for helping to bring down blood pressure, so you definitely would not want to combine this with anything else that you're taking for blood pressure. But I would just say that it's always a good idea to double check with your doctor before you combine this or any herb with any meds. You know, when I come on here, I'm talking to you guys about herbs and I'm telling you how I mix and match and play with them, but I am not on any meds, so I feel comfortable just playing around with these things, you know, and I just share that with you guys. But do know that you do want to make sure that if you're on any meds that you double check, because last thing you want to do, like I said, if you're already on blood pressure meds, is to take an herb that is also known for bringing down blood pressure. That would be no bueno. So just wanted to throw that out there before I wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please go ahead and share with anybody else that would benefit from it. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.